mother dog and puppies, one of the most common examples of animal reproduction we might see. The puppies are dependent on their mother, just as these baby rabbits are dependent on their mother. Baby birds, too, are dependent upon the parent bird during the early days of their lives. Some animals, such as these tadpoles, can get along without parental care. In general, amphibians and other lower forms of animal life require little or no parental care. If we look at a sample of pond water under a microscope, we'll probably find amoeba, one of the simplest animals. It is also an example of the simplest kind of reproduction in animals. This large amoeba is reproducing asexually. The single cell is separating by simple fission into two cells. These slowly move apart until the parent cell becomes two separate cells, two individuals. Hydra, a simple multicellular animal, can also reproduce asexually. A bud develops on the parent and eventually breaks off to become a separate individual. In the more complex animals, reproduction is more complex. These are eggs laid by a female frog. Here are the beginnings of dozens of frogs, new individuals. Each one begins with a single fertilized egg, seen here highly magnified. To produce such an egg cell, two parents are necessary. The male parent produces special reproductive cells called sperm cells. These are living sperm cells of the frog. These are sperm cells of a mouse. The sperm cells of the male parent and egg cell of the female are brought together by a process we call mating. In some animals, mating includes an active courtship, such as the male fish is carrying on. Reproduction begins when, after mating, sperm cells and egg cells unite. This is called fertilization. In the frog, it takes place outside the female's body. A fertilized egg is called a zygote. The first stage of growth begins when this single cell becomes two cells. By speeding the action with the camera, we can watch the division taking place. First, into two cells. Each will form half of the tadpole. Then the two cells divide into four cells. The four cells divide into 8 cells. The cells continue to multiply, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, and so on. All cells of the same animal. Gradually, thousands of cells begin to form a single embryo, the tiny living body of a new frog. Here we can see the beginnings of the head on the right. Each growing living embryo is encased within a protective, jelly-like covering. After a week or two, the tiny embryos break out of their jelly-like coverings. They hatch. We followed one example of reproduction in an egg-laying animal, the frog. Other animals, including birds, also reproduce by laying eggs. Of course, two parents are necessary. In birds and in insects, fertilization takes place inside the female's body after mating. Many insects, such as this moth, lay eggs on twigs or leaves, where they are left without further care. Turtles and many other reptiles are egg layers too. The female turtle usually lays her eggs in sand, where they are left to hatch by the warm sun. Although the shell of a turtle egg is soft, it still provides protection for the developing embryo within it. The eggs of birds, like this familiar chicken's egg, are hard. Within this protective shell is the living chick embryo. In a similar way, the turtle embryo develops within the turtle egg. And so in the egg-laying animals, birds, amphibians, many reptiles, and others, the embryo develops in an egg outside of the mother's body. In mammals, fertilization takes place inside the female's body. The embryo develops inside the body of the pregnant female. Here are two mouse embryos in a late stage of development. Do you see the similarity between this mouse embryo and the chick embryo we saw? In early stages of development, embryos of different animals show even more similarities. So the embryo grows until it is large enough to be born. Being born is a vital step in the process of reproduction, and it takes place in a number of ways. When the young emerge from eggs outside the mother's body, we call this birth hatching. The hatching of birds is probably our most familiar example of this kind of birth. Let's watch the process. As we do, we might think of a simple definition of reproduction: the creation of a new individual from one or two parents. And here is our new individual, a baby robin. This is hatching too, the hatching of tadpoles. Most fish are born in a similar way. Here is an insect hatching from one of the insect eggs we saw. The turtle eggs left in the warm sand are hatching too. Hatching from eggs is a very common form of birth in animals. In most mammals, the young emerge alive from the mother's body. Watch the mouse carefully. We are going to see the actual birth of a mouse. At birth, the young are quite helpless. A finger gives us some idea of their size. Now the mice, about half grown, are beginning to resemble the parent. They are still dependent on the mother's milk for food. Some birds, too, must feed their young. Other young birds, such as chicks, can eat and run about soon after being born. The young of turtles and other reptiles are able to take care of themselves as soon as they are born. Young frogs and other amphibians also get along by themselves. Most baby fish, too, need no parental care. In mammals, the period of dependence on the mother, or infancy, lasts longer than for other animals. For example, it takes 6 to 7 weeks after birth for a baby mouse to mature. Young dogs have a longer period of infancy, and also a longer period of growing to maturity. Human babies have the longest period of dependence upon their parents. The years of infancy and gradual growth to maturity are stages in the development of an individual, a new individual that is the result of reproduction. We saw that reproduction in the lower animals is simple. Fission is one method. Budding is another. Both are asexual forms of reproduction. Sexual reproduction in the higher forms of animal life takes place when the egg cell of the female is fertilized by a sperm cell of the male. Fertilization may take place outside the female's body, for example, as with many amphibians, or within the body, as with insects, for example. After thousands of cell divisions, the fertilized egg grows into an embryo. Sometimes the embryo develops within a shell, outside of the mother's body. Sometimes the embryo develops inside the mother's body and is born alive. Although the process of reproduction varies greatly among animals, the end result is always the same: the creation of a new individual.